Can I take it out?
Yeah.
Oh. I always think I have too much voice anyway. Whoa. And, in good Wallow County order, I always, at noon, we know there are going to be some stragglers there, right? So I use 5 minutes of BS here to warm me up. So, and I thought today, something I haven't done in the past is make sure that you know the whole Josephi Center staff, all right? So Dara is our development director here. Coley is right in the steps, and she works with me in the library. And if you go down to the hospital and see the Nez Perce, Oregon exhibit that we did, that's eventually going to go to the state capitol, she did all the artwork on that. Okay? And where did Cheryl? And there's Ariana, who runs the classes and the exhibits. Okay? And where's Cheryl? There's Cheryl. Cheryl is the queen of the place. Okay? And right over to her right, Seth is our hired techie. He's not on our staff, but when we get in trouble, we go to Seth for the tech advice. And DJ, where's DJ? DJ, oh, right behind the camera. And yeah, DJ tries to keep us in line on schedules and stuff like that. See, I knew if I kept talking, more people would come in, right? And I also thought that I should point out, these hanging panels that we have? They were designed by a couple of artists. Rod Amberson worked with them. But the ironwork there is Chuck Fraser, who's hiding right behind there. And I don't know, we don't advertise that a lot, but take a look at that ironwork. It's something else. It's really, really pretty. And it's really an effective way to display things. And the other thing is that we have an exhibit upstairs that's Carla Timentwa, who's a Nez Perce woman and an incredible fabric artist and beader. And go up there afterwards if you get a chance and look at the one piece of beadwork from 10 feet away and tell me that you think it's beads. You have to get like this close to see that there are tiny, tiny little beads, millions of them. And that'll be up there for about 3 weeks. Okay, Cheryl, do we have anything else? No? She went back in her room. Okay. Anything else?
There's tons of classes, summer camps, youth classes on the website, so if people are interested. A silver jewelry class that is really awesome, very inexpensive. What else? We have the words and music women's concert this Friday night.
Oh, that's right.
At the Josephi Center with a suggested donation of $10. And then we'll have our Youth Arts Festival.
Youth art coming up next. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Did I miss anybody on our staff? Or we're getting big now, Anyway, but very few. I think Cheryl's the only one who works full time. The rest of us, if we work full time, we don't get paid for it. we're part-time employees. Oh, I have to give one more nod to Beth and the Monday night food program. How many people here have made it to Monday night dinners? Okay. If you haven't made it, you should try. It's a pretty good deal for food and conversation.
And Robin and Winding Waters has been a big part of helping make it happen.
All right. Congratulations, Robin. So, in introducing Robin, I went through a couple of things in my head, and I thought, well, when you go through all the Paces and the Butterfields and the Bartletts, and you end up with ranchers and loggers and bankers. Wasn't there a Pace banker? Yeah. And school teachers, a bunch of school teachers, and how Robin, and then Robin, I remember when she came back after graduating college, and she said, well, I'm taking a little time off, and then I'm going back to grad school, and I'm going to get I think I'm going to do speech pathology and sign language, and she had a whole raft of things ready. But then she got on an actual raft, and away went that plan, I guess. Anyway, it's a delight to have you here, Robin, and to have all the rest of the Paces here, too.
Well, thank you. As you guys heard or may already know, my name is Robin Pace. And for those of you who don't know me, I grew up spending my summers here in Wallowa County. During the school year, my parents are both teachers in very rural northern Nevada. And so grew up there during the school year and back here in Wallowa County during the summer. And then after college, I came back, and after a couple seasons of doing the seasonal work where you do summer water sports and winter snow sports, I came and stayed. And speaking of staying, this is my 12th year working for Winding Waters River Expeditions and being a river guide. And I got started in rafting because I was having a pre-quarter life crisis when I was graduating from college. I didn't know what to do, and a good friend down in Amnaha said, well, have you ever thought about rafting? I always wish I would have done that when I was younger, and I thought that sounded pretty good. As you heard, I thought that was going to be a summer or two, maybe, and here we are. Prior to doing this work, I had been on a couple short river trips just with family, but nothing to this degree. And so I definitely initially started raft guiding and being on the water for myself. And at this point in time in my life, I am here and do it because I love being able to take people down on the water and teach them about the environment and teach them about the place. And with regards to how often we have technology in our lives, also give people the opportunity to just have a break and step away from phones for a little while. So with that, I want to start today by introducing some terms, because if you haven't been on a river trip or on a river, you may or may not know what those things actually are. And to have this conversation, I think it's a lot easier if you do. So it is Women's Month, and I'm here speaking partially because of that. And when you're on the water, if you are in command of a boat, you are a boatman. That is universal term. If you want to call me a boatwoman, that's excellent too. But everyone universally is a boatman if they are at the helm of and in control of that craft. Let's see. So a swamper is someone who is learning how to be on the river. And often a swamper rides with another boatman. Usually that's on a gear boat. And the whole goal of the swamper is to learn how to be on the river. Initially, and a long time ago, boats didn't drain. And now rafts are, for the most part, self-bailing, or there are electric devices that bilge water out of a boat. And before that, the swamper was the person with a bucket scooping water out of the boat for whoever was rowing. And so that's what a swamper is. And then, so a gear boatman is the person who carries all of the things, and that includes the living space, the sleeping spaces, kitchen sink, and the toilet. So those boats can get quite large. And a trip leader is often referred to as just a TL. Sometimes they're called the lead boatman. But But the trip leader is the person who's in charge of the trip, and that the calls are on them versus if we're going to camp somewhere or move on or anything that the group needs, taking other people's needs into consideration and making plans and choices around that. And so a guide is someone who works professionally in the industry. You can go on either private or commercial trips. So a private trip is just a group of people where everyone's paying evenly to go take a trip together. So if you're going to go camping, everyone's going to pay into groceries and pay into gas and pay together. But a guide is someone who works commercially, and that means that other people are paying that person to take them down the river and charter an experience and help manage all of those things. Rapids. Rapids go on a class scale of 1 to 5. That's actually 1 to 6. So 6 is technically considered unrunnable. Class 6 rapids can be runnable for some crafts, so possibly there are waterfalls that kayakers are able to run them, but for a raft, that rapid might still be considered class 6. Class 1 is pretty low, fun. You couldn't really get yourself into too much trouble if you tried. And class 2, we run a lot of class 2 waves, and they're some of my favorite. Class of a rapid doesn't necessarily determine how big the waves are. It is a contributing factor, but a lot of my favorite rapids are all class 2, and they have really big, fun, rolling waves, but it's like a roller coaster ride, and it isn't a big, huge feature. Whereas sometimes you can get into a class 4 rapid, and there's a lot of rocks and obstacles, but it may or may not have big, huge waves. And then in Grand Canyon, they use a 1 through 10 scale, and that's because that length of river is about 280 miles of river, sometimes 220, depending on where you take out. And that just enables those river maps to be graded against one another, like against themselves. So as you're moving down the river, you can understand that if you just went through a class 3 and there's a class 7, you can understand that scaling for that length of river. An eddy is where there is something, an obstacle exists in the current, and it is causing water behind that to move backwards. And so that can be a landmass that comes out and going around a corner, and so on the shore there's a big eddy. An eddy can happen in the middle of the river behind a rock. So a rock can exist, and there's a small eddy behind a rock. There's a lot of places and ways an eddy can exist, but it is a place where the water is not moving downriver, more or less. A hole is a feature in the river. Often there is something that exists in the main channel of the river, and water is often going over that, and off the other side it is going down. And when that happens, a lot of times, or often, water will keep flushing and moving downriver, and what a hole is that there's enough force that that water comes back this way and can hold things there. A groover is the toilet. A paco is the sleeping pad. Dry bags are bags that are not necessarily dry, but they are splash resistant. Depending on how well you seal them or the type of dry bag, they may be more or less dry. And a dry box is typically a space that is big and metal, and that can be a variety of sizes. Some dry boxes are this big and this deep, and others are smaller. And dry boxes tend to carry dry goods of food. They also are great places to put trekking poles or tripods for cameras or other things like that. Sun hats when you need to make sure they're really nice and secure somewhere. And then ammo cans. And ammo cans, again, range in a lot of variety of sizes. For me, I have an ammo can that's basically my toiletry bag, more or less. And it is a smaller size ammo can. And ammo cans came into the rafting world kind of post World War II. And at that point in time, there was an excess of gear. And that was also the point in time where a lot of people then started having different leisure, and rafting started becoming a much bigger activity that people would do. And due to the fact that ammo cans are largely waterproof, and there was an excess of that gear, that ammo cans largely became a staple in river culture and still exist that way today. We use bigger ammo cans for our trashes, and ammo cans that are about that size on rivers like Grand Canyon are also used as the groover, and I'll show some photos later around that. Yeah, so those are some basic terms that I thought would probably come up and wanted to explain a little bit. So boats, rafts. I have to come out here for a second. This is Sarah. You may know Sarah. Sarah is Beth's daughter and a lovely, lovely human being. I have guided with Sarah for 7 or 8 years at this point in time, and have met her and known her from, barely being able to understand the concept of and where she needed to force her body to move the big gear boats, all the way to last winter. Sarah and I did a 30-day Grand Canyon trip together, which was the 280-mile trip. And a lot of the photos in this presentation are from that trip. We had a couple folks with really lovely cameras, and it's nice to have people take photos because I don't often do that when I'm out on the river. And a lot of the other photos that you see are photos from work. And so I do want to say these largely are not my photos. There's a number of lovely people who have taken them. So that is Sarah. And Elsie is the person who is rowing. And I would say in this situation, Sarah is the boatman and Elsie is learning. This was Elsie's first ever river trip, and she went on a 280-mile Grand Canyon trip, and is learning how to move a boat. This boat in this photo is 18 feet long from nose to tail, and it is what's called an oar rig. And so it's an oar rig because it has uses oars to be propelled forward. And all of this stack here in the back, these are all dry bags. You can kind of see some ammo cans here. The table, I'll move out of the way. The table that goes in our kitchen is underneath here. Buckets here are our hand wash buckets for in camp and in kitchens. This is a sleeping pad, so someone's bed. And in the front of this boat, in here, there are a bunch of bigger ammo cans that held dry goods and food and canned goods. So there's a lot of equipment and gear that goes on a boat. And so, again, this is an oar rig. And Sarah's psyched. I had to use this photo because she loves talking about boats too. And seemed like a great way to get started. So this is a paddle raft. And this boat is 14 feet long in comparison. And this is called a paddle raft because the people in front all have paddles that they're helping to propel the boat forward. This paddle raft is called a stern-mounted paddle raft. And stern-mounted is due to the fact that in the back there, Rita, who is rowing, has oars. So a traditional paddle raft, the person in back would also just have a paddle and would be steering the boat. And this is a gear boat. This boat is 20 feet long. It's hard to tell. The diameter of those tubes are 4 feet in diameter. And when the floor is not inflated and I stand in that boat, it hits about here. That's how high just the tubes of that boat are on me. And on this boat, you can see there are a lot of things. There is a swamper and a gearboatman. Here you're starting to see some of those ammo cans I spoke of. There's a dry box here and a dry box here as well. There's a cooler here and in the front under that table. In the back is all of the groover situation and a bunch of bags with tents. Sometimes there's a motor that rides right here. So again, these are those sleeping pads and bags and tents and cots and the whole kitchen. So a stove and propane and cooking utensils and pans and pots and very few things that are not on that boat, I guess, is really the... and this is a dory. A dory is not a drift boat. This boat was built by Paul Aronston and Larry Davis a couple winters ago. They built 2 boats in tandem. And this boat is all wood and a fiberglass on top. And so the reason why it looks like a drift boat is the dory boats were built and based off of Driggs drift boats out of Western Oregon. And they were originally designed to run Whitewater in Grand Canyon. This is in Hell's Canyon. But they were designed to be a multi-day expedition-style boat that had the rocker to be able to go through really big rapids and be controlled. And a dory operates very similarly to a kayak. The bottom of the boat is curved, and on the side edges, you actually steer a dory by moving the boat onto one side or the other, and it actually curves and rides the water like a kayak would. And part of why it is not a drift boat is due to the fact that it is enclosed. So a drift boat would be open, and this is the top of the dory, and so step out of the way a little bit. It's built so that this all drains into the footwell, and then in the footwell there's actually an automatic bilge that drains water out of that. And both the nose and the tail of the boat actually drain everything into the footwell of the boat. And so the rower has a button that they can actually just click and push that button, and it will start draining the boat. There are a whole bunch of hatches in that boat that you can see, and it's hard to tell how much space is in there, but essentially this whole boat that you can see nose to tail, everything is space. Everything is space to hold gear. And then I had to include one more photo of the dory in Whitewater to be able to demonstrate Paul's excited face of stoke, and also how close and how low the edges of that boat get to the line of the water, due to the fact that it is really turning. He's leaning, and part of how you do steer a dory is you moving your body very little in that boat can really angle how that boat turns. It's kind of amazing. And this is a ducky. On our river trips for work, we often bring a lot of duckies on the river, and they're inflatable kayaks. We call them duckies because their little tails, when someone is paddling in front of you, it wiggles back and forth like a little duck butt. And duckies are also supposed to follow the big boats through rapids. So they are kind of sandwiched between bigger boats and act like little duckies in a line. This is the confluence of the Snake River and the Salmon. So this is in Wallowa County, just over there. And as you're looking at it, the Salmon River is coming in on river left. And I do believe that's a gear boat coming out of the mouth. And then Looker's right is Hell's Canyon. And technically where that little ducky is now the Snake River. And where the gear boat is still the Salmon River. This was a couple years ago when there were some fires in the fall, and it gave really just beautiful depth. I don't necessarily love being on the water during fire season, but it gives the same effect as when there are rainstorms, and people don't also love being on the river when there's rain. And when there's moisture content in the air like that, it enables you to actually see and understand the depth of the place that you're in. So even though it's not always my favorite way to be outside, I think it allows you to see the beauty of the place in a very different way. And that's why I included that one. After going to college, I don't think I've used a presentation PowerPoint since then, so. So this is camp, and this was on the Grand Canyon trip that Sarah and I took last year, this photo on the left, and that is looking down above into camp. And here you can see this is the kitchen. This was actually a sauna tent because we went in December through January, so it was very cold. And then we have all of our boats set up out in the water. And because the Colorado is still dam controlled, the water fluctuates up and down just like it does in Hell's Canyon. That means it's really important to tie your boats up in a way that they can move in and out with those tidal changes. And so at different points in the day, it's difficult to explain how far out those boats went, and it's a little nerve-wracking when you walk to shore and the boats are 40 feet or more just out floating in the eddy away from everything. The picture on the left is a camp kitchen, and those buckets in the front are all for washing dishes. And so you have a first bucket, which rinses everything off, a second bucket, which has hot water and soap, a third bucket, which is rinsing, and then the fourth bucket has bleach and disinfectant in it. And you can see kind of in the back, there are some of those dry boxes that I spoke of. That has all of the plates, dishes, cups, you name it, that all exists over there. And then tables in the back and a stove with the utensil rolls and everything else. And this is a kitchen that we had in Grand Canyon. And so it's kind of similar. The stove is a little bit different in that it is broken up in a long line instead of being 3 burners by 3 burners. It is 3 by 1, basically. And this is called the blaster, and that basically is a propane torch, more or less, and we use those to heat up all of your water, whether that's dishwater or water for tea, coffee, all of those things. And all of those white boxes are what I was speaking to of like ammo cans, and those were what would have been in the front of that big 18-foot boat and filled with food and gear and all of the things. In Hell's Canyon, we're able to carry all of the water that we use on a trip, and we stop at a couple springs. In Grand Canyon, you have to filter regularly because of how long the trip is. And the groover. Couple different kinds of groovers. And so this photo on the left is a groover setup that we use here in Hell's Canyon. Often we have a second one of these that goes around that yellow bucket. But it's really important when you're on a trip to separate solids and liquids. Because you do operate in a leave no trace manner. So you take everything out with you, and it's a lot easier, not easier, it's a better practice. When you're on a river, liquid waste actually goes into the river. And so solid waste is what you take out with you. And on this photo on the right is what I was speaking to. That is a big ammo can in Grand Canyon that's utilized for solid waste. It is only ever used for that, that's why it's clearly labeled. And what you can also see there is what's called a riser that helps sit you up a little bit higher because those ammo cans are only about 1.5 feet high. Any questions about the Groover?
Fun story of why it's called Groover.
Yeah, I can. So Groovers. Groovers got their name because of using ammo cans. And so before people utilized toilet seats on top of the Groover, you would just have an ammo can. And an ammo can, if you've ever looked at an ammo can, on top is 2 metal sides, and metal on either end. But when you would sit down, there was no toilet seat. And so when you would get up, back in the day, and still in the day, people wear quite short shorts. So when you'd get up, there were some lines, some grooves that would run down the back of your legs. And everyone would know that you and everyone else were being healthy and regular and using the Groover. But that is where the Groover got its name. And even when other types of toilet systems are used on the river, it's still traditionally called and referred to as a Groover. And so the theme of this talk and this month is strength and adventure. And I think strength and adventure are pretty inherent constantly on a river trip. And so instead of separating the two, I really wanted to combine them. And this woman on the right, her name is Marilyn, and she is a true enigma. I have got to meet her on 2 different occasions at this point in time. She ran Grand Canyon for a really long time as a boatman, back when women were not boatmen. And she is demonstrating the correct way to use a sand stake. And those sand stakes are what you pound into the ground and then tie your boats to as an anchor. Maddie and I have different ideas of what a sand stake can be used for. But we are also demonstrating another theme of river culture, which is to be fun and playful, and costumes and dress-up nights are very common and regular and just fun. I believe in this photo we may have been at a place called Tequila Beach, which is the beach immediately below the largest rapid in Grand Canyon, thus the name. But back to Marilyn, I wanted to highlight her because to get into river guiding, it's very rare that you get on a boat and learn all of these skills by yourself. You're always going to learn them from somebody else. And they may have taught themselves some of them, but they likely also learned a lot of them from somebody else. And so some of the people that I want to highlight that I don't have photos of are all of the drivers, and are all of the people that work in kitchens packing food, and are all of the people that may or may not necessarily go down and be on the water during an expedition, but are the people that totally made a trip happen overall. And Marilyn, she takes us to the river and taught us how to use all of the equipment, because for our trip we rented all of the gear, which is a unique experience to Grand Canyon, that you can rent everything. They take you to the river and set everything up for you. She is still an incredible boatman and goes down regularly, but on this trip she showed us how to do all of the things. Yes, strength in a physical way is definitely very much needed. And it's not the end-all be-all. This is Sarah and Kira, and they're dropping into lava, that largest rapid that I spoke of. Kira on the front, she was the youngest person on our trip and very new to rowing. And I got to have a really beautiful experience about halfway down the canyon, 18 days in or so, where Kira was on this boat all by herself, rowing it. And Sarah, who is someone who I have got to teach, was on a boat with me, rowing me, and I was sitting in the back of this boat. And so I was watching the person that I taught row, who was following the person that she had taught row down the river. And that's just to really highlight that rafting is generational. And that was the first time that I got to see generations of women guides that I was part of like all in a line like that, and it felt really special. I'm sure Sarah's probably yelling, and Kira is too in this photo, and I did later. Give me 1 second. So this is Maggie, who was rowing, and Corey was in the front of the boat. It was both their first time down Grand Canyon. Maggie is a first-year river guide, so she did a bunch of paddle rafting prior to this trip, and sometimes she took lines that made me flinch a little bit, including the bow line that's currently dragging in the river. Not necessarily best practice, but that just goes to show there are a lot of ways to do a thing. And there are a lot of ways to learn, and next time I know for sure that she will have that in her boat. This group of ladies was really impressive because they were best friends, and they were always cackling. So 30 days, 280 miles, always cackling. It rained almost 3 weeks out of 4 weeks of this trip, which is a lot of rain. And it was wintertime, so we were all in dry suits with neck gaskets. And a dry suit is something that you put on your body, and you go through a birthing canal every single day to put it on, and then you come out of a birthing canal every day at the end to get out of it. So it's a very unique experience, but it was impressive to watch someone who was so new to her skill to learn as much as she learned on that trip, and also to just see her face it and do the thing. This is myself and Jamie. Jamie in the Hawaiian shirt was following tradition, which it is tradition to dress up for lava. Because it's the biggest rapid, you often need to make sure that you saved a pair of shorts for this rapid, or you saved a shirt for this rapid, or you put on a clean shirt to dress up and respect the power that exists here. And so she had never been down Grand Canyon, but she knew that she needed to put on a fancy shirt. And I think this photo also really highlights the amount of teamwork that it takes to be on a raft. Because yes, I may have the oars in my hands, but what Jamie is doing is high-siding, and that is she is moving her weight and body to the higher side of the raft and facing the wave head on. And we spent, 30 days together. We'd never met before this trip, and we became very fast friends. She actually just got off her second Grand Canyon trip about 4 days ago, and she learned how to row on this trip and rowed this boat through multiple large rapids on that trip, and I was very proud of her. And I was also always impressed. From day one, I told her, I was like, yes, I am going to be rowing a lot of the things, but you are going to help me so much by moving your body into waves. And every single wave rapid we went through, she was taking it on like a linebacker, and she would jump across the boat one way and the other and just take every wave head on. Guiding or just going on the river involves a lot of other skills. It involves carrying a lot of things. This is the groover, so pun intended there. It involves carrying a lot of shit. And it involves rigging and moving a lot of gear all the time. And because often when you change camp every single day, you are breaking down and setting up camp every single day. And so that means you are rigging and de-rigging your boat every single day. Sometimes it involves fixing things even when you don't want to. These are both situations where our motor broke down. So in the Hells Canyon river stretch, the last 20 miles of that river, are very, very flat and very much flat water. And so all of the boats move together and become a flotilla. And so just because we are rowing boats does not mean that we don't know about motors. And in fact, the more we know about motors, we found that it's really helpful to not having to row. And that's a skill that I remember the first time I learned something about a motor was as a swamper, and a motor, something had happened, and the gearboatman pulled me over and was like, hey, here's this rogue thing that you might need to know someday. And about 7 years later, I was doing that rogue thing that I thought I might need to do someday, and Sarah has a safety strap on me so I don't fall in. On that Grand Canyon trip we took, this is Maggie. Again, Maggie's so awesome and had so much joy. And in this photo, she is stuck on these rocks. And guiding involves a lot of patience, and it involves doing things thoughtfully and slowly when you're not in an emergency. This is not an emergency because Maggie is very safe. The boat is very stuck, but everyone is very safe. And in this photo, Jamie and I were able to get our boat over approximately 150 yards downstream, because just out of sight of this, the current goes very quickly, and so we didn't have a place to pull over. And so we did scramble back on the rocks with a Z-drag kit, which is part of this rope that you see here was part of that, and it's essentially a pulley system that you use to get something unstuck that allows you to put a 3-to-1 or more advantage on something that is stuck. So next one. Sometimes boats go upside down, and that's usually okay too. And again, once everyone is out of the water and in a boat, you are no longer in an emergency. And so on this trip, no one else on this trip had ever had experience with a boat having gone over, and I have had that experience. And so I was here teaching all of them how to flip a boat over. A lot of times you may see in videos that there's a boat and a whole bunch of people standing up on one side of it, and they have ropes going over to this side, and they lean back and pull the boat over. And this is a way that you can get a boat flipped back over without everyone having to get wet. So in this situation, it was December. 2 people had gotten wet because that boat had flipped, but there was no need for us to get 8 or 10 people wet. And so by using the advantage of, ultimately we came and stood up kind of up here on this higher area and moved the boat this way. And so we were able to get advantage and leverage by being a lot taller than the boat and just pulled it up and over that way. Being on the river involves learning different ways to make food. And sometimes you need to improvise. And in this photo, Rita is using the blaster, which we use typically to boil water to make sure that this flatbread is nice and crispy with crispy and golden melty cheese on top. And this is so perfect because Rita is a geologist. And this photo, Sarah is demonstrating how layers work in geology with her sandwich. And I think it's really important and applicable to be able to take dense concepts and make them easily understood by using a tool such as a sandwich. This is Jamie, who rode in my boat and took on all of those waves. As you can now see, Jamie is not a very big person. However, Jamie is very ingenious and would regularly snag a box to be able to cook dinner or breakfast. Over here in this camp, the sand was so soft that the table actually sunk into the dirt enough that Jamie was basically the only one who could use the table effectively. And that was her breakfast kitchen area. And yeah, just to say there's a lot of figuring it out. This is not something we talked about. This is a sand mat, and we put those down to catch food particles and other things that may fall down from a kitchen to help with that leave no trace practice. More ingenuity. This is Leah. There are approximately 30 tents on here, and instead of taking 30 laps or whatever, maybe 15 laps of carrying heavy things over and over again, she used a cart and a really long strap to make that a lot easier process. Riley over here made the decision that she was gonna sleep on her own tiny island beach upriver, and so she put all of her things in a ducky and paddled herself upriver so that she could have her own sleeping beach for the night, which I thought was brilliant. This was also in Grand Canyon. This is Kira, the person who rode on Sarah's boat and was the youngest person and learned how to do that trip, or learned how to row. And then Sarah and I are over here, and all three of us are currently learning from Jamie. And Jamie is a canyoneer, and so she knows how to do these skills. And so this is an example of where two people who know how to do something really, really well really don't know what we're doing here. But we're learning from someone else who does. And Kira is probably better at it than any of us. So this is in Matcat Cambia, which is a side creek that comes in on river left of the Colorado of Grand Canyon. I have come to learn that some of the greatest strengths that I have as a river guide are actually very soft. I think when I first started guiding, there were only several women who worked at Winding Waters, and at this point in time, we're over half. And as that has happened, I think I have seen and been able to participate in a lot of beautiful changes. And mostly, there's a lot of laughter from everyone, and there's a lot of softness from everyone. And we do work with so many wonderful, beautiful men. And in this presentation, I really wanted to highlight all of the beautiful women that I get to work with, and all of the skills and things they have taught me. And this is another river kitchen, but this photo is really special because this past season, all of the trip leaders at Winding Waters were women, and that was just such a unique, fun thing to kind of turn around at the end of the season and notice. It wasn't something that was planned or intentional or really like thought of until we kind of got to the end and we're like, wait a second, we should probably take a photo. And Sarah was in her chicken costume, which is what kept her warm for the entirety of the Grand Canyon. This is Rita and Celia. And then Sarah and I before we were going to embark on our Grand Canyon adventure. Celia was the other woman who worked at Winding Waters when I started working. And this photo, the three of us, actually got to participate in the first women's only raft trip, and it wasn't planned that way, but all of the guests were women, and all of the guides were women. And it was really special to be on that trip. I think guiding also involves a lot of joy, and this is Kira and Sarah somewhere having a great time, and so regularly you would turn around and see them enjoying themselves like that. I had to fly a kite. My mom loves kites and rockets and all things that fly through the air, and so while we were down in Grand Canyon, I remembered that I have packed a kite in my dry bag for approximately 5 years and had not ever used it. And so I made sure to pull it out, and it was the perfect blustery day to do so. These are some more of the Winding Waters women. Meredith Brand is in there in the middle, and Mary Edwards, who is one of our lovely shuttle drivers, is in there as well. And then Celia and Becca, who is one of our trip leaders, and then Avery in the yellow shirt is going to be one of our trip leaders this year. There are a lot of reasons why I love being on the water, and I think this picture really highlights a lot of it, is that there are always more corners to move around and see what exists, and different light to catch. And in the wintertime, really we were trying to find sun anywhere because it was very rare. But I love being able to share views like this with people and be able to cultivate an environment that enables them the ability to go, because not everyone can do this or has the ability to learn from someone to do this. And some of the things that are happening at Winding Waters, Clark Schimmel created Pandion, which is an Indigenous-led learning trip. And so there's Nez Perce youth brought down the river. And that's, I think, a really special thing. There are other youth and kids trips that we do to let people who may not experience the river be down there. And the Enterprise Class Senior trip is one of those. There are so many local kids and local people who live here. And all of Hell's Canyon essentially is in Wallowa County. And so the ability to get to take local folks down is really special and important, I think. And that's the end of the photos that I have. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer. Does anyone have any questions?
Did you run Dory's this summer?
I hope so. Yeah, there will be dories.
Did you have snow on your trip?
We did have snow on the Grand Canyon trip, and then in the photo with the 3 trip leaders for Winding Waters, we also had snow down in Hell's Canyon this fall on our last trip here. And I took a video of it, which I didn't share because it was loud and difficult to capture, but I had to take a video because it was actively snowing on us down in camp. Yeah.
So, Robin, what is your youth season and how many trips would you estimate you do a year?
Repeat the question, please.
The question was, what is our youth season and the estimate of how many trips I run a year? For Winding Waters, permitted season starts at the beginning or the end of May around Memorial Day, and then it goes to about the second week of September. We do operate trips slightly beyond that on either end, and what that just means is that it is non-permitted in the sense that anyone could go during that time. During permit season, people need to have a permit to launch on those days. And I would estimate that we run approximately 40 trips a season. And here in Hell's Canyon and the Grand Ronde and the Lower Salmon River, the trips we run on the Grand Ronde are typically 3 days. Sometimes they are as long as 5. In Hell's Canyon, our trips are typically 5 days. And on the Lower Salmon, they vary between 4 and 5 days.
How do you recharge your battery after all of those trips?
The question was how, I'm assuming you mean me personally. How do I recharge my battery after all of those trips? And I think that's a mixed bag. For me, part of my battery is repowered by taking people down and being able to see them connect with the canyon. And for some of them, it's the moment where they let go of something because their phone isn't always like binging in their pocket. And for little kids, it's often them being excited and enamored by every single thing. And I would say that is the exact same for the older people that I've been able to bring down the river. I think little kids and elders giggle equally. Equally. And it's everyone in the middle that we're learning from both of those groups. And when I come back in the county, sometimes I go to the lake and hide in the shade Or I really like to cook food, so I'll cook a lot of food. That's one of the ways I recharge my battery.
You said, you kept repeating that this is not an emergency. Could you describe an emergency and how?
So the question was, I kept saying this is not an emergency, and so the question was to describe an emergency and how you handle that. I think for the most part, the emergencies I've experienced are pretty short in the sense of seconds to a half minute, and that's when maybe someone is still in the water and not in a boat. And so I think, so for instance, if someone takes a swim, the goal is to get to that person as fast as possible. That may or may not be an emergency because it's possible that the next mile and a half is a big pool of flat water. And it's not that I'm not going to keep going to you as fast as humanly possible, but it's that that situation isn't an emergency, I guess. Emergencies are pretty clear when you can see a look on someone's face and they're shocked and shook. And I think the way that I have found to manage that is to get to that person and get them in a boat if they're out of a boat, or, I've had someone have something in their eye that felt like an emergency. It's whatever for someone is like that shock factor, and doing whatever you can to help ease that, and recognize when that is within your skill set and when that's without your skill set and you need to get help from somebody else, whether that's an immediate team member right next to you or an outside source. Yeah.
Robin, how do you deal with the fear from the big waves? Do you guys have it?
The question was, how do you deal with the fear from the big waves? Do we as guides have it? And the answer is yes, we absolutely do. Every time I go scout a really big rapid, my body is definitely vibrating to a different degree and level. And I think a skill set of a guide is to be able to be the person of calm, even if you're not feeling it yourself. Because tying that into the emergency question, it becomes an emergency if I say that it is, right? Or if I express that outward, then it becomes an emergency for more people because more people are seeing what I'm experiencing. There are traditions for guides, and some of the ways we deal with fear around big rapids are, one of the sayings is clean teeth, clean lines. And so brush your teeth in the morning, which is good hygiene, but particularly brush your teeth in the morning before a big rapid and make sure they're clean. And so they're little things. They're the little things that make you feel good. So some people always want to untie their boat in a very specific way. So they're routines and they're things that allow you to stop focusing on the big splashy thing that's right there that you can feel in your body and figuring out how to kind of drop out of that space.
Robin, do you ever have clients who just panic and say, I'm not going to do that rapid, take me up high?
We have walked people around during really high water situations via our calls, but I haven't had someone in that situation.
That baby wants a raptor.
When do you predict that the Grand Ronde will be permitted?
When do I predict the Grand Ronde will be permitted?
Because you know now how hard it is to find a carriage.
Yeah, the Grand Ronde is a very popular river. I think it is really important to have write your own permit rivers because that is what enables people and families and to go without winning that exclusive lottery ticket. And there is a balance between people being able to go and learn and impact on the land. And I know that there has been talk, at least a handful of years ago, of doing partial permit on that. And so the busier days of the week or some specific days of the summer would be permitted and other days would be write your own permit. That's such a loaded question because it can take a long time to put things into effect. And with Minum no longer doing rentals, it'll be interesting to see how that impacts usage down there. But I mean, anywhere from a couple of years to 10 years, depending on paperwork. Really, it depends on users and river users and how we manage and are thoughtful to space, I think.
Robin, this isn't a question. I just want to say, number one, thank you. But I never have been on a river before. And I did the Winding Waters trip this past summer because I wanted to do it before I died. And I'm not dying, but I was sexist. I was my old girl self that grew up without Title IX. We had Becca be our guide. I wanted Paul. I wanted Mike. I didn't think she could do it. I'm sharing this with all of you because this is women's strength. Becca was fabulous. All the women on our trip were so strong. There was so much relationship, and it taught this old person that I need to shake myself up here about what we can do. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Something that,
It is 1 o'clock, so if people have to go, but Beth has a question.
Yeah, I just want you to speak to that, sense that you are breaking ground as a woman, and what that feels like on the river, and what you see the future of that being.
Beth kind of asked, speaking on what Judy had said with regards to, you know, you may get on a trip and see that there's a small woman who's going to be your guide versus a bigger, stronger, maybe older man who's done it for a long time, and just to speak on that and kind of the future and what that might look like. I have come to learn that the best rowers are the smallest people, and that's because they don't have the ability to rely on muscles and strength to move a boat. They have to learn how to work with water. And when you're rowing, you are learning and dancing and moving with water. And that's not to say that a big person can't dance a boat downriver very, very well. But I am saying they probably learned it from a small person, or they learned it when they were a small person. And that is often women, but that is not exclusively women. And I think hopefully what the future of Whitewater looks like is that people get to be out there doing what they love because they're skilled at it. And hopefully that looks like people of every gender, because I think our crew has only gotten better the more people we have brought in, and the variety of trips that we have brought in. And that means the variety of people that we learn from. We run veterans trips, and we run youth trips, and we run this whole gambit and spread of all of the things and all of the people. And I think that makes us better guides, regardless of your gender, is just the ability to understand and communicate with more people.
Well, thank you very much.
What's that?
I said that's a primer.
Thanks.